just wait for evolution to do its thing. All the kids are going to become immune. They're
She's
going
not
to build their own society. Everybody else is going to die.
Hello?
Hello.
Welcome to the first episode of A Zero's Journey.
Thank you.
Did you forget the name?
Yes, I almost said a zero's call.
You made a graphic and everything.
It's the first one, okay? I'm working on it. We got to like massage it into the brain.
I am CMB.
I'm Kael.
We are here to break down the story, the narrative of The Last of Us, which very few people probably don't know the story at this point.
Very few people probably don't know the story.
Yeah, that's not a double negative, right? Very few.
That is a
people
very interesting sentence structure.
probably don't. That's grammatically correct, but I'm also not an English major, so it's probably also not correct.
We're starting off great and how we're going to be the ones to tell people about the narrative of a game.
Yeah, so we're gonna probably talk about the game and the TV show, the adaptation. But for anybody who might not know, the overall plot of The Last of Us is we're in a post-apocalyptic world.
Spoilers.
We follow the main character Joel. We see a brief glimpse of his life before the apocalypse. We see him 20 or 30 years later. I think it was 30.
I think it was 20. Because he would have been like 60.
Okay, so 20 to 30 years later, we see how he's adapted to life. And we see him, he loses his daughter, and then see him take on a surrogate daughter. Is that the term you'd use?
Yeah, that's a good term. Yeah.
As he's forced into a hero's journey.
Now, you played The Last of Us pretty much on release, right?
Yeah.
Like 2011, 2012?
I played it on launch. I played it a couple of times. I played the remastered version, and then they came and remade it, which is the version that you started playing.
Yeah, my experience was watching you 10 years ago play at various points. I don't think I watched every single second. And then I had seen the show. I've heard a lot about The Last of Us. I watched you play the second game through when we used to stream. And then I started playing. I got through Act 1, I want to say. So I did get at least some experience with the gameplay and how it integrates the narrative for this video. But I am over 30 now, and I have a hard time with first person, and it was making me a little ill. Third person. I have a hard time with swinging cameras. Having to move quickly like that, especially older games, even though this one's updated, but like Left 4 Dead really bothered me too. I made it as far as I can. I want to finish it. It's just going to be very slow going for me. Yeah. I can only play for about an hour at a time. And I'm also not a stealth gamer. I am a run in and blow it all up gamer. And so that was really hard to adapt to, but I did play on light mode, and then I had to switch to extra light because CMB over here was making fun of me. I died twice in the prologue. So that was how my play was going. Yeah, but yeah, I was enjoying the story. That's what I was there for. I was there for the vibes. I was not there to be a pro gamer. So I have this lovely book, Dramatic Storytelling Design. This one's Ross Berger. This I kind of used to help us think about the story, and they actually have a section on The Last of Us and the hero's journey that it follows. So the beginning of the story, introduction to Protagonist's purpose, and that's the prologue of the game.
That's pretty much, it's packaged pretty neatly, right?
Yeah. It's not really, that section is definitely about the vibes. That is just introducing you to the story, walking around. And what I really enjoyed was I'm not usually, I usually get bored quickly if I have to walk around and like pick things up and interact. Like that was more entertaining to me. So I was able to go through that way. And there was stuff like when you're driving a car and Sarah, not Ellie. I called her Ellie the entire time. Sarah, you could like look around in the car and look out the windows while everybody's driving. And that was really cool to me. Yeah. But anyway, so we learn about an outbreak.
I think the prologue was very effective. And yeah, you do get to the outbreak very quickly, but they established a lot of strong characters, and even though the prologue was pretty short overall, you got a lot of characterization for them. So you start off with Joel and Sarah, his daughter. Even though you're not with her for long, you get a strong connection between the two of them because they're both very kind of sarcastic and they're casual with each other.
Yeah, I would not have talked to my parents like that growing up.
They're a lot of witty stabbing jokes, and find out it's Joel's birthday. He gets his present, and then as you go on to take on control of Sarah, as she's starting to figure out what this outbreak is, you get little clues. There's been like you can pick up items to read them. You read a newspaper that talks about this spreading illness. And you get there's a lot of moments to stop, like you were saying, to stop and look at objects along the way that kind of define the characters. And they're optional things. And some games do this a little too much. Like there's too much to stop and check out. Like I don't think you'd enjoy the Elder Scrolls with all the different like books and stuff there is to read and pick up. But
I want to enjoy that stuff. That excites me to know that there's that much lore there, but to have to sit there and have a task basically it becomes a chore.
Yeah, so I think it's just enough to really put you into the game. And if you don't read it, if you skip it, there's enough there's cutscenes and dialogue plenty along the way to still immerse yourself in the game. But so Sarah goes, finds her dad. She hears from Uncle Tommy. Uncle Tommy calls first, and Uncle Tommy is somebody we get sporadically through the game, but we get a good sense of who he is through the prologue. So Uncle Tommy calls. Sarah starts looking for Joel. Joel comes back. The first time you see Joel again is him running away from the neighbor who's become infected. See something very wrong with the neighbor there.
We're like right in it at that point. As soon as that neighbor comes through the glass.
And it escalates very quickly. Tommy shows up the house.
Yeah.
Tommy shows up the house. They know they need to leave. They need to get out. They're seeing explosions in the city. And just to speak more on the way it defines the characters and gives us a lot with very little. As we're driving along the road and Sarah gets a chance to look out the windows and see what's going on, they pass some people on the road, and they've got a child with them. And Tommy wants to stop and pick them up because he has a kind heart. You can tell he's got a soft spot and he wants to help these people. And Joel, Gingy, when we watched his breakdown of the story, he's a YouTuber that we watched some of his content to prepare. Gingy used a word that stuck with me. He calls Joel pragmatic.
Yeah.
Joel's very logical. He needs to get from point A to point B, and it's not about the emotions. And even though the emotions are there, he kind of keeps them below the surface.
Which is a theme for him throughout the game,
Mm-hmm.
is exposing those emotions and becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I guess. What would you have done? We've seen enough zombie movies at this point. We have an outbreak like that, zombie or not, and we're driving, trying to get away to somewhere safe. There's another family on the road. We have room in our car.
I can't. It's hard to say for sure, not being in the pressure of these situations. I don't think of myself as emotionally closed off as Joel is, but I think I would still go because I don't know if I can trust them. I'm in a high pressure situation.
I would be panicking so much between yes and no that we would have passed them.
So yours is indecision.
Yeah, well, I would be fluctuating because I am a person that runs through every scenario. And so I would be sitting there like, okay, well, they could be fine. They could be really helpful to us, but also they could murder us.
Yep.
Or they could unalive us if I need to put that in edit.
Fair enough. So, so as the prologue, the rest of it's basically you're escaping, ending up in terrible situations, the road getting closed off, the fire spreading through the city, very quickly reaches the climax of the prologue where Joel finally gets out with Sarah. He's been separated from Tommy, and a soldier stops them and ends up firing on them to try and stop the spread of the infected. Of course, everybody knows that Sarah dies. Tommy comes through, shoots the soldier, but not before, Sarah's taken a mortal.
We've known Sarah for 10 minutes, and the way that voice actress went on that scene, everybody, I think, probably at least got chills.
Yeah.
At the very least. Like, I didn't cry, but I was feeling like, this is a lot. I just got here.
I can never see that scene without tearing up. and we don't have any kids of our own, but it doesn't stop you from your heart going out to Joel. And as you haven't seen how closed off he can be, but you've seen.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Phone should be on silent mode.
It's on silent.
You've seen how Joel prioritizes the safety of himself and his family. It's portrayed so well through the voices and the animation.
And then from there, we kind of just, that's like the end. And then we come into just depression. It's been 20 years. So they call that mixed in all of the pandemic starting is the inciting incident. Now they move into refuse the call.
So the two major factions that we learn about early on in this next stage of the journey is that there's the military that has kind of brought order to the remains of humanity, at least as far as we see in the United States. And there's the Fireflies who are there to resist military rule primarily. And we see early on, we get a lot in Joel's first few moments. We see how harsh the military is because they stop those people in the street, start scanning them to see if they're infected. As soon as they detect one that's infected, they kill them right there in the street.
My gosh, yes. I forgot about that. That was like a moment for me. I actually stood around and watched what was happening. Normally I would just run through and be like, okay, next objective. But I'm sitting there. I'm like, wait, what are these people? They're getting scanned. I stood there and watched. And then they're like, okay, there's a cleanup on aisle 3, and then they just leave, and there's just a body in the ground, and that's just life.
You see the last person, they actually don't even get a chance to scan. The guy freaks out, starts running away. We don't know if he was infected or clean, but they don't take the risk. They shoot him down. They gun him down on the street.
Yeah, we definitely get a reintroduction to life now and how much has changed. I think what's interesting is that Walking Dead was pretty popular as a show at this point, and it took the opposite outcome, I guess. The opposite. What do you call that? Yeah, just
scenario.
Yeah, the opposite. Where it's not the government. The government completely collapses in Walking Dead, and it's just people and groups of people and how they end up interacting with each other. There's nothing militaristic that's left to continue ruling over people in a way.
I think later on in the story you do find some military factions, but yeah, I think a lot of the what kept you interested in Walking Dead was the different societies that they form. You get to see some of them form their own societies, but you don't stay there for too long. So you find out that Tess and Joel as smugglers got screwed over by one of their associates. You move forward, you hunt them down, and again, you see a very pragmatic side of Joel. He hasn't really let himself be emotional. That you can tell he has a working relationship with Tess that may or may not be romantic. They never really clarify, and I don't think that they needed to. But in their interactions, they're very much focused on what their objective needs. They want to get their guns back that were stolen by Robert. It's very much a business dealing.
I mean, there wouldn't be a game, but at this point, I kind of was questioning how Joel had the will to move on. And because we jump straight from not Ellie, Sarah passing away to 20 years later in the post-apocalypse, we don't get any context into what drove Joel to continue going at all. And I felt like he was so attached to his daughter that he had nothing left to live for, but he does. And I don't get why.
I think for me, it goes back to he knows what he needs to do to survive. And it's just, I think the will to keep on living is just to live. He's not there. He's not enjoying life, I would say. He does what he needs to do. And when you see him and Tess finally catch up to Robert, who had, betrayed them, it's very much, it's brutal. They snap his arm when they've got the information that they need from him. Tess shoots him in the head, and that's pretty much the end of that dealing.
Yeah, I guess we do continue the brutality. So then we meet Marlene,
leader of the Fireflies,
and she gives us cargo. She gives us, what do they call her? She's not cargo.
The contraband. They refer to her as contraband, and that's how Marlene draws them in. Is because they're smuggling. They're usually smuggling weapons and other illegal items.
Marlene is the one that bought the weapons that Joel and Tess wanted from Robert and had already paid for. Marlene takes the opportunity, knowing that Joel and Tess don't know where these guns are and have already paid for them and really want them to complete what they were doing, to insert herself as like a, hey, I have what you want, even though you already paid for them. But for you to find out where they are, I need you to do something for me. And it was supposed to be really easy.
Mhm.
It's just go across the city.
Mhm.
And they find out that there's just this girl that needs to go across. Her name's Ellie. They don't know why. They don't care. As pragmatic as Joel has been, it's just like, okay, if you're going to make me do this, we don't care about this girl. We don't want to get emotionally involved with her. We barely even know her name right now. Like, we have no backstory on her.
And he doesn't really want to know, I
Yeah.
think, is he's trying to get the job done. But he wants to get from point A to point B. And so,
Yeah, he makes Tess talk to Ellie a lot.
and I think that's him kind of subconsciously, like, he's not looking to replace his daughter, and he never directly compares Ellie to his daughter.
So we start going across the city, and this is where you really start getting a look at what the world is like now. It was just another way they told the story. You know, just with the background detail that you get is just what you come. It's not random. The enemies aren't as random as like, oh, we just need a wave of this mishmash of things coming at you. No, this is an area that was not as recently hit, so it's going to have flickers. It's got more evolution has already happened.
And at some point when Joel and Tess are going through the city, they come across the spores. What do they call those? Affected?
The cordyceps?
You go through an area where they need to put their gas mask because the bodies have decomposed and they're releasing spores into the air to create more infected. And I think it's an interesting mechanic.
So then we get attacked trying to escape. The person at the drop-off location is dead, and this is where they say accept the call. They're like, we get to the point where Marlene told us to go, and they're dead. What do we do now? And
Joel here is very much still refusing the call. After he finds out that Ellie's infected, she claims that she's immune, and I think the tension's high. There's a lot of unknown factors. I think Joel at this point, he just wants to get by. He just needs to get through the day, go to the next day, get done what he needs to do.
Tess was interesting to me at this point because she's been introduced as almost a boss of her own, a mob boss. I'm not saying girl boss. We're not girl bossing here. She's almost like her own little mob boss. Smuggling world. She's just as brutal. You don't really get a sense that she has a lot of sympathy or empathy at this point. But suddenly, you get her reaction to Ellie is this sudden switch to like a hope. She's like, holy shit, there's a possibility here. Someone is been bitten and hasn't turned. Like, there's a hope here. And it was very jarring to me, but I also understand that moment was like the first moment of in 20 years that anything could possibly be different from right now.
Yeah. And I think it's great characterization for Tess. And I remember when you were playing it, you said, why does Tess care? Like, up until this point, like, she's been a different case. She's been very much like Joel, very focused on the objective and getting done what needs to be done, survive.
But we don't know her backstory.
We don't know her backstory. And I think that gives her a lot of characterization, but still leaving that backstory unknown is that we don't know what happened to Tess before the infection started, and we don't know what happened to her in that gap up until she met Joel. We just know that they're business partners. So her seeing Ellie and slowly this hope is growing eventually makes her kind of a counterpoint to Joel.
That's a very common thing in storytelling in general, is having something that mirrors. Is
that a foil? Or is foil more antagonist?
I would have to look up foil. I don't know like specific words. But it's very common in literature to see characters mirror each other. And it happens a few times in Last of Us story.
So if you're okay, we'll jump ahead to the point where we lose Tess as
Yeah,
a character.
that's the point of no return.
Okay. So would you say that him accepting, for me, accepting the call feels like when Tess finally convinced Joel to go on, because Tess has been bit. We know there's no escape for her. She's going to die, and she decides to go out on her own terms. And she pleads to Joel to finish this journey with this girl because she could be a hope for humanity to cure this infection. And to me, Joel had never really accepted it until he had to do it himself, because at this point he's doing it with Tess. He's partially doing it for Tess and for himself.
Yeah, that's why I feel like the refuse the call really just, I don't think there's exactly one specific moment. It's just this entire segment. Like, I am not doing this. But yeah, then Tess,
Move over a little
oh, am I scooting out?
bit. Just a little.
Whoopsies. Tess is not an option.
Yeah. She's not a crutch to lean on emotionally, because also he's let her do a lot of the talking. He doesn't have Tess as a buffer anymore.
This is the, I guess, point that forces him to acknowledge that he's not completely without empathy or sympathy, or he's not completely devoid of human emotion.
But he's trying real hard.
Yeah, because he's like, I don't want to do this, but I do have a line that's unwillingly, what's that? I can't think of that word.
Like
I don't know.
It seems close enough to me.
Yeah, he unwillingly kind of is like, okay, this is my line. I guess I'll have to get this kid to safety at the very least. And we go from there into Act 2.
So to me, that's both the accepting the call and the point of no return, because he can't go back. The military. So the ones that actually Tess stays behind to stop the military that's been following them, because they're chasing them through the outskirts of the city. So Tess stays behind, uses her last moments of humanity to go out fighting. What he ends up deciding is that he's going to get Ellie to his brother Tommy, because he used to be associated with the Fireflies, and that's his next goal. So he's very much he's setting a goal for himself, and he says, once I do this, I'm done.
And interestingly, refuse the call and accept the call. This is not the only time it's going to happen for Joel. It is a cyclical thing, and he's going to be confronted with it multiple times.
Yeah.
Then we go into Act 2 with adjustment to the new world, and you see just how much has changed for what we know of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting to hear what Ellie knows of life, which is
only this world.
Yeah, only this world, only books that she's seen. She loves her joke books.
And I think that's something that the game does really well, is they continue what we saw in the prologue, where you get tidbits of information. You can find an interactable, book or letter in the world that's not long. It's usually something short, something emotional, or it's something that Ellie finds, like you said, joke books. You find out that Ellie has this sense of humor that we probably would have seen with Sarah, had Sarah been, the character we stuck with. And I think it irks Joel, but it also gives us a lot of character development, characterization, insight into who these characters are and how they see the world differently. Ellie's a child, and even though she's grown up in a post-apocalyptic environment, she has a bit of humor to her. I guess that kind of leads us to where they meet. Bill, did you want to talk about that at all?
I was going to stop a little bit before.
Go ahead.
Bill is in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
That's like when we first started going. I think excuse me. In the woods, Ellie makes a comment when a rabbit runs through.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, whoa. Like, you can tell she's never seen a freaking rabbit.
Yeah.
Like, that's common to us. She basically says she's never been outside.
She hasn't. We find out she's been inside being, tested and protected.
Yeah.
Her whole life.
And as she was training.
She was, part of the academy that raises children.
Then there's also a moment where she comes across fireflies, and she's standing like a pure moment of joy you've never seen from anybody in this story. We've never actually seen just joy from someone. We gotta survive. We can't be standing here.
Yeah, a little bit like Joel in that way. She then goes back to the focus, So it's the next stage of her.
The escalating burdens goes on for a while. Get stuck in Bill's trap. We've seen traps all over, and kind of get the feeling that someone's here in this place that we come out of the woods to.
Mhm.
Um, and Bill is also very like driven by just the purpose of the day.
Yeah, the need to survive.
Yeah. Um, he's annoyed that they're there. They've screwed up all his traps. He's got to relay them. Who are these people? I think like Joel and Bill kind of know of each other, but they haven't met before.
I thought they
Is what I
had.
believe.
I thought they were business partners at some point. Not the way Joel and Tess were, but they knew each other. Joel figured he was their best resource for help. He's trying to deliver Ellie.
Okay, I don't remember exactly, but they're definitely not friends.
I think they're very alike in that way, and so it causes a little bit of friction between them. Obviously, they're not just buddy buddy when you meet Bill, um, but Joel convinces him to assist,
Yeah.
and he says, if you help us out, we'll get out. What did you think of Bill as a character?
Unfortunately, my my take on Bill is very colored by what happened in the show.
Hmm.
What we saw in the game was very minimal,
Hmm.
and he was just a very to the point guy. He was going to help. That was it. I already kind of knew more about him based off of what they expanded on, so I'm not sure I got the greatest like first impression as a player.
Yeah, definitely, because the show was a very similar character, but a different look at him. Saw a different part of his life in the show, I think. And even though he was very much the same, he had a different outcome in the show. But uh, I think you saw very much the same core of who the character was.
Then after this, I ended my play.
Yeah. So they got the car. Got ambushed on the road at some point, and so they get separated. Or they don't get separated. They lose their vehicle, their mode of transportation. They're back in kind of survival mode on the streets. And Sam and Henry initially, that's also a very tense situation. They're mirrors of each other, and
Again, yeah.
yeah, in that there's an adult figure caring for a younger character, and so they don't trust each other. In fact, I think they meet with conflict.
The kids.
But with kids, yeah. But at that point, it doesn't matter. I believe Joel and Henry. Henry was the older brother, right? I think they wouldn't have hesitated to pull the trigger. They did hesitate, but I think if they had to do what needed to be done, just because there was a kid there, and the kids have that innocence still. Not all of it, it's very different from a child would be today, but they still need to be children. They still need to be kids.
Most of the adults at this point have been very closed off from each other, very much resource relationship. That's it. This is where the mirror of Henry and Sam shows a potential outcome for Joel and Ellie, in that Sam becomes infected, and you have to watch. He makes that decision, and then he also decides that's the end of his purpose,
Yeah.
and so he's not going to go on, which I also think, again, just makes me question how Joel went on. And I want to know, but we're not going to get that we weren't going to see 20 years of history happen in this game. So
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know or doesn't remember, Sam does, the younger brother of this other group, gets bit. Doesn't reveal it, but they spend the night, and I think Ellie kind of sees a shift in his attitude. She notes that he's not as jovial or as lighthearted as he was when they were journeying together. And in the morning, he's turned, and Sam, having turned, starts attacking Ellie. And Joel immediately, he doesn't hesitate to pull his weapon, because he knows there's no outcome other than this. Henry, pulls his weapon on Joel just to instinctively protect his brother. It doesn't matter that they've reached a point of no return with this infection, but then decides to do it himself to save Ellie, and then not having the will to go on, turns the gun on himself. And it's a very emotional scene, but Gingy pointed out, it was a good point, that it cuts very sudden. He turns the gun, Henry shoots Sam, turns the gun on himself, and then almost immediately the screen goes black, and you don't have a moment to sit with the emotion. So it rips these characters away from you, and I think that almost hurts more, that you don't get time to process this pain that you just saw on screen. Almost hurts more as you you're forced to go forward. You got to deal with it.
Lots of trauma. Nobody knows how to deal with it. We're just compartmentalizing and moving on. And then the end of the very long escalating burdens section of the hero's journey is getting reunited with Tommy.
Yeah. So they get to this dam. These people have kind of made a new society around the dam. They've got clean water. They've got a structure to live in. And I think Joel very keeps on with that. What we just saw with Henry and Sam is that there's not a lot of time. He doesn't spend a lot of time reconnecting with his brother. He very quickly moves into what he wants, and that is to have Tommy take care of Ellie and get her to the Firefly. This was his goal. This is where he wanted to get, and so he's very much to the point.
You know, it just occurred to me that happens directly after Henry and Sam, where he is confronted again. I think really put Joel in a mindset of, I cannot do this.
And you get to see that in one of the most, I think one of the most shared cutscenes, one of the most iconic cutscenes in the game. Joel tells Ellie that he's leaving. He's giving Ellie over to Tommy. Tommy's going to complete the journey with her. And she, unlike Joel, she has grown attached. I think she has latched onto him through all the trauma that they've been through. She's been through a lot of firsts with him. Like, it's her first time leaving the city. You know, it's her first time seeing, they encounter like animals, they encounter fireflies, they encounter strangers. And he's gotten her through he's gotten her through all of those things, all the dangers. And so she has very much grown attached, and she's not afraid to say that. And you can see Joel struggling to hold back until the point where it turns to anger.
We're already seeing Joel has lost all of the people who have been dependent on him. Lost Tess as well, but we are confronted immediately. It's not just Joel comes back, Ellie's like, yay, you're gonna take me. No, there's now been a little bit of a breach of trust, and that's what the next section is, loss of trust. Where we actually get to explore Ellie's feelings really deeply, I think, for the first time. Joel has to go find her, and she's reading that journal, and why were kids, this is all they cared about was what they had to wear, and boys. And she's lost a little bit of that trust. She's hurting because Joel actually left. And they need to mend that. I appreciate very much that they didn't just bring him back.
It would, I think it would have cheapened the whole thing, right? And I think some people, I think the book even mentioned that it's a little bit of like a false, I don't want to say false start, but like a false end. But there is that trust between characters.
And I don't think that they had a full trust anyway. It was just beginning. They both have just started reaching out, and they're both very cautious about that, because that it happened right at the beginning. It might have been more of a fragile time for them.
And Joel's trying to, and he does it, and it hurts, and he knows that, but he's afraid of it hurting worse later on.
Then they move into Midpoint and Low Point, where the ranch gets raided. They continue their journey. There was a little scuffle. You got to keep the action for the game, especially as a shooter. Then you get to the lab. The lab, once again, we've reached a place that was supposed to be the end point, and it's not.
Yeah, the goalposts keep getting moved for Joel.
That's a very good way to say that. The goalposts keep getting moved, and he's like, well.
So I believe, everything, the game moves by seasons, regardless of chapters and stages in the journey. The game very much distinguishes between, spring, fall. So this is the end of fall, going into winter, as we see at the end of the lab section. They're attacked. The fireflies aren't there. They thought the fireflies was going to be there. They're not. Moved on. I don't remember if this is where the point where they found out they went to Oregon or to Washington, but they know they're not there. They see raiders come in. Joel's fighting them off like he always does, but this encounter ends differently. In that one of the raiders knocks Joel off of a balcony, falls, takes
basically a mortal wound.
Very close, very much close to mortal, especially in a post-apocalyptic environment. He doesn't have medicine. They probably have supplies to patch him up. He's not getting stitches. So it becomes, moving into winter is very much Ellie's chapter. And it's not just Ellie and a partner like you've been Joel with Ellie as a partner. It's Ellie on her own.
This may be where Ellie accepts a call.
Yeah, in a way.
In her own journey, accepting a call. She's moving from dependent to being a support.
And it's another example of her not being able to uh, just be a child. She's forced to survive and take care of somebody else.
And it's the first time Ellie's not really a sidekick.
So Joel's wounded. She's out there. And when you start the winter chapter, you're several weeks into her caring for Joel, and he's not recovering quickly. She's learned how to hunt, which I thought was really big because before this, she hadn't left the walls. She hadn't seen a lot of these animals. So I think it's a big way to show how much Ellie has had to grow. And that's interesting. Playing as Ellie, and she's been captured by David and his gang of raiders, who are the same raiders who attacked Joel. You find out that David knows that it was them, and so he's looking to take revenge. And so Ellie takes it on herself to survive. She suspects nobody's coming. She doesn't know what's happened to Joel. She doesn't know that Joel's woken up and looking for her. So it's a very character-defining moment for Ellie, because even though we as the players know that Joel is coming, she doesn't. And so she's running from David and the other raiders. And she finally gets trapped in that that bar, that restaurant, where she's fighting him off. She can't see him. All she knows that either she lives and he dies, or he catches her and does terrible things.
She's grown up in a pretty harsh world. She at least knows the brutality of the landscape, and that it's not a very nice world anymore. But this is the point where she gets to experience. It's not just that we're fighting the infected. We're also fighting ourselves.
And she has killed somebody. There's a point earlier on in the game where Joel's getting drowned,
right.
And she has to kill him. And she says, she's like, she just kind of speechless. Before she had killed to save Joel, and now she's killing to save herself.
So she saves herself, stabbing David to death brutally.
Yeah. And that's a painful scene too. The way it's portrayed is because she is stabbed when she finally stabs him. She gets the upper hand. She doesn't stop, and probably long after he's dead. I think we get her perspective, but we don't see the body. But she just keeps going until Joel catches up to her and stops her and tells her that she's safe.
Releasing a lot of emotion from being in a very traumatic situation.
Yeah. As if she hasn't been forced to grow enough here. She just got out of this life or death situation.
That ends Act 2 into Act 3, where the redemption path, which is spring now, and Joel and Ellie, they've had this experience where Joel relied on Ellie. Joel can look at her now as less of a burden.
Somebody he can rely on. I think he starts kind of accepting a lot of the jokes. I think this was where they meet the giraffe.
Yeah.
There's the giraffe, and Ellie has this, again, she has this childlike wonder. And here Joel, if you choose to as a player, Joel lets her experience, because a rabbit is one thing, but a giraffe is a completely alien thing to her.
Yeah, in one of the videos that I watched, it pointed out they needed this moment to slow down the story, because you just played as like a young girl who was captured, and it was a very brutal moment. You need this moment with a giraffe that's like, oh, how sweet, to like take a breath.
Because storytelling is all about peaks and valleys. You can't be at 100% all the time. You need the moment to emotionally reset and recover, just like the characters do in the story. And
it's like, rip out your heart again.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't hurt as bad, unless you bring that character back to a neutral state or a happy state. And so I think it's a really impactful moment. Stopping and letting Ellie interact with this giraffe for as long as you want to. The game doesn't force you to move on.
So then it's the ticking time bomb is introduced, and this one is interesting where they mark it is Joel stops to let Ellie know that they don't have to go forward with this and they can go back to Tommy's. But I don't know that there was necessarily a time limit, because then it goes back to, again, escalation. That's like the word today. Escalating Burdens, Intensify is the next piece. Ellie shows Joel a picture of his daughter that she came across somehow. I can't recall. That's very emotional to Joel, and then they go through more fights with infected, because this is a video game, and then an underwater incident that forces Ellie to swim, and Ellie has not been able to swim.
It's a mechanic at several points where Joel, of course, guiding Ellie through the environment. Now, as a mechanic, you need to several times get her a platform to sit on while he pushes her through the water.
And immediately after, when you might be like, "Yay, Ellie can swim! Woohoo! Good job, girl!" No, we're obligatory scene in Climax is what this outline calls out. It's right when they emerge. Joel gets knocked unconscious by the fireflies.
Yeah. The Fireflies don't know who they are. I'm sure if they knew who Ellie was and were expecting them. So in a way, Joel has accomplished his mission in getting Ellie to the Firefly.
Yeah. So Marlene, like, yay, got Ellie here, and then explains that they're taking pieces of Ellie's brain in a way that Ellie's not going to survive.
Yeah, so I don't think we mentioned this. We just kind of assumed everybody knew. The whole point of Ellie being resistant to the infection is that hopefully she's the chance for a vaccine or cure. They can extract whatever made her immune and replicate it to cure the infection. Gingy pointed out in his video that throughout this whole section, Ellie doesn't know what's happened. Ellie's unconscious too. So she doesn't know that they've just been rescued by the Fireflies. Or Joel, he's let that bond form, and he can't stop himself.
I guess in a way, echoing the family on the road, the choice is save Ellie so that he doesn't personally have to go through the emotion of losing someone again, or potentially Ellie's death is like a possibility, could provide enough insight into the infection to create a vaccine.
So Joel breaks free from the guard, kills him, eventually starts just murdering his way through the entire, facility, killing Fireflies left and right, which is one thing because they're firing on him. But then you finally get to the operating room where there's doctors and nurses. The game actually gives you control. It lets you shoot the doctor yourself, which is kind of brutal.
Yeah, I saw a couple different variations of that. Like someone had a shotgun, someone like just did the knife, and like you had a choice on how hard you were going in there.
So the game lets you kind of experience his drive to save it, and let you kill the doctor yourself
while she's unconscious
through the whole thing.
Get into another face-off with Mark.
Yeah, you meet her in the basement. She in that you don't get to see the resolution of this conversation.
Resolution of bomb. We cut to Joel driving away with Ellie. I kind of think it's funny that Marlene took their goods that was supposed to be smuggled, and he's taking her cargo, what she had meant to have smuggled.
Yeah, and this is where Ellie wakes up. This is the first thing she's seen since the underwater incident. She has to rely on Joel to tell her what happened, and so there's a lot of unknowns for her. She asks Joel. Joel makes up a story because he can't bear to tell her the truth of what he just did, because he's
taking the choice from her that she had made, because she was told her purpose was to save humans.
And I think this is a really this really adds a lot to the ending, because we don't know what Ellie's choice would have been if she had been conscious and told. If she had known she was going to die, would she have chose to go forward anyway, or would her bond with Joel have caused her to refuse that? Would she have refused her call? She also doesn't know what was taken away. Joel tells her that the Fireflies had found other survivors that they were experimenting on, other immunities, people that were immune, and that it didn't work out. So Ellie was no longer needed. So there's another unknown for her.
So I'm going to take this to a different story. Neil Schusterman writes a series called Unwind, and his kids get unwound for body parts. Their parents sign them over. It's the basic of it. There is a group of people that are very religious and devout. They raise certain children in their family. It's called tithes, and they are raised to understand that they are to be unwound.
They're basically organ donors.
Basically, and so they have a psychology, because they've been raised like that, to just kind of accept it. And it's really hard throughout the whole series, anytime they come across tithes, to get them to break that mentality that their life is worthless, and that their life needs to be given for everybody else to be happy. So I kind of, with how much it was reinforced to Ellie throughout those weeks, I feel like it might have influenced her heavily. She didn't grow up that way. It's been like a few months. I feel like it would have infiltrated her and changed her psychologically enough.
You think even though if she knew she was going to die, she still would have.
I think it would have been a strong possibility.
Yeah, and she does have a lot of survivor's guilt. She expresses it, but she doesn't understand why is she immune? Why did she survive when other people had to die? So that survivor's guilt is something that she lives with as a burden. So the game, as we approach the ending, Joel lies to her, but because she's been through so much with him, she has some doubt. I think you can see it in her face, but she has to trust him.
Well, what is she gonna do about it? Like, I don't know that she has the resources to change.
Yeah.
Even if he told her like, what is she gonna do about that?
Well, I think she's she's a strong character who's proven that she can survive. She can survive on her own in a life or death situation. I think their goal was to go back at this point in the story. We learned that they're going to go back. If she wanted to cut off ties with Joel, she probably could. So in a way, she chooses to trust Joel. I think, and then I think two more scenes play out. We see what really happened in the basement when they were confronted with Marlene. Joel executes her on the ground because she is wounded. He kills her knowing that the Fireflies, if they know Ellie is still alive, they're not going to stop coming because it's a powerful streak.
Kind of feel like Joel is like an anti-hero and he takes down these people that have established themselves as the heroes of society. And
I don't think he does that on purpose. I think he's the same character he's always been. He's doing what he needs to survive and to protect. He shoots Marlene, protect Ellie and himself because he wants them both to survive.
I don't think that humanity getting a cure would have improved Joel's life enough to matter, because his life before, he was a very hardworking dad. He already had a little bit of a strain in his relationship with Sarah because he had to work so much, but like Sarah understood. But he didn't seem to have a very glamorous life, and nothing changes for him to go from working hard as a single dad to working hard as a single dad to somebody else in here. And I don't think that there was enough incentive for him to let it go either. Like the world reviving doesn't matter to him because he doesn't give a shit about anybody else.
I think with the speed and swiftness and brutality with which he reacted, he had one objective, the same way he's always done, getting Ellie from point A to point B. Now it's him getting to Ellie. And
just subconsciously.
Maybe. Yeah, we don't know what goes on in the character's head. And another unknown at this point, with Ellie's doubt and Joel's doubt about their actions and what's transpired, we don't know that Ellie's sacrifice, we don't know 100% that vaccine could have been created.
Ellie is also not special enough as a human being with her DNA to have, and out of any possibility in evolution, to have been the only child to be immune at this point. There's going to be others. Like, there's a statistical possibility, like there has to be other options at this point.
I think that's true. I think that could be true, but the characters don't know that. And this is the only thing that has set Ellie apart as far as she's known her entire life. It's the only thing that's driven her forward, is that now she knows that she's immune. She wants that to be her purpose.
Just wait for evolution to do its thing. All the kids are going to become immune. They're going to build their own society. Everybody else is going to die.
She doesn't learn about evolution. She doesn't go to school.
She has books. She has books left over. We see some of them.
So we get to the final scene, and Ellie finally does build up the courage to ask Joel if he lied to her. She has that little doubt in the back of her head. She can't not ask. She confronts it. In another way, it's breaking the bond very much. He chooses to lie. Parents lie.
Yeah, parents, that's what a parent does.
And that may be misguided or incorrect. It's based on your perspective and your experience.
And then it ends. Until part 2. But we're not going there today.
And then you get the DLC, and we don't need to go too much into the DLC, but we get to see a little bit of what happened to Ellie before the events of the game and during that winter month.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit after watching some videos that were critical of the DLCs, in that they were kind of just out of some people felt, this is an opinion of some people who played, that it was just out of context and like all of because of the way that the emotion escalates throughout the game that just didn't feel as strongly as the rest of the game, and the DLC kind of fell flat for them. And to me, when we had talked about this, it's like when these authors write these short stories that accompany their books, and I don't generally gel with them because they're like out of context moments, and I didn't need it
Mm.
per se. Like it doesn't go with the story, and yeah, I guess it's kind of cool to learn a little more about the character, but it's such a small piece, and
Mhm.
I don't need it.
Yeah, I think it's out of context of the story, but it adds a little bit of development to the character in that you see Ellie and her best friend at the time. Um, and they're trying to enjoy their childhood, and they go to this abandoned mall where they get to see again bits of fragments of what life was like before. They get to be children, so you get a little bit of that childhood as Ellie and Riley are there. Riley is the friend waiting to die, and I think that's the start of her survival skill. And I think and again, you don't need it for the story. You get plenty of that character development throughout the game, but it's there if you want. You know, not everybody liked it. I personally found it was good, but I would have been fine without it. But it's
Yeah.
there.
I guess that's like a big moment where trying to be a child had a consequence for her, and that's where you see again when they go into the woods the first time, and she's delighted by the fireflies. And it's like, oh, sorry. It's like, no, you can't let your guard down
Mhm.
at any point. Anyway, that was the arc as outlined by Ross Berger
Mhm.
for The Last of Us. But then I think we were also, well, first off, where does this rank for you?
I think this is it's going to be subjective. Not everybody's going to feel the same way about it, but this was one of the most impactful story games that I've ever played. I don't mind cutscenes. I'm not bothered by them unless they're, overdone. Even in Metal Gear Solid, games that have hours worth of cutscenes, I'm not that bothered by it. I would still rather play the game, but they're entertaining. There are a lot of cutscenes, but they're very emotional. There is a point to them. You get character development, story development.
I from the Act One that I played, I read a lot too, and um, if I'm gonna read, I want to read, and I don't want to just have to break up my game time with having to read text and to stop and watch a story. And I think Last of Us did a good balance of it, but also it wasn't just a balance of cutscenes to playtime. It was a good balance of what information was given to you within your playtime because they were able to give you a lot and let you experience it instead of just passively watching a cutscene.
Mhm.
So you were able to interact a lot. I very much appreciated that because when I want to sit down and play, that's what I want to do.
Mhm.
Play. I don't want to read. I have a few hundred books upstairs. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna sit down to play a game and have to read for my 2 hours of playtime.
You're right, but a lot of those moments can happen if they're happening outside of a cutscene. It doesn't necessarily force you to stop. You're right.
Yeah,
Ellie
yeah.
finds something, a joke book or a note or an item, and the characters discuss it as you're still moving forward.
But then the show came out.
Did you want to talk about the show now?
Yeah,
Okay.
the show came out last year, the year before, 2022. Sometime after a massive pandemic, this show came out,
Mhm.
and critically, I think a lot of people received it as one of the best video game adaptations.
It's definitely, I think it would rank my top three. Not that I can list three off the top of my head. Right now, I can't think of an adaptation that's a faithful adaptation. I think The Last of Us was effective in that the things that it did change or needed to change were for a purpose. They felt deliberate, but not detracting from the story.
Finding out now, after watching it, how involved the original game director was
Yes.
in writing the show.
Yeah.
I think it was very much like, oh gosh, who wrote Scott Pilgrim?
Brian Lee O'Malley.
Yes. So Brian Lee O'Malley, they did a new animated series for Scott Pilgrim, and it's been 10 years plus, just like The Last of Us, and he was integrated enough to make changes that made sense and refreshed the story, but also kept the same themes.
Yeah, I think that's a very big difference between them. But with the same degree of effectiveness. Is that the remade Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is what it's called on Netflix, completely changes the structure of the story. But I think he did it as a person with a more mature view of the world. And so the character changes that he did make and the story changes that he made were effective and they felt natural. And even though the story changed, we got to experience the characters. He changed one key event, and then the characters all reacted to that. In The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann, who directed the game, was one of the showrunners and writers. And so one of the things that I really liked, the way the infection spread in the show or in the game was through the spores spreading through the air. In the TV show, you get little hints. First episode I thought was really good. Is it spread through food and more specifically wheat? So if you picked up on the little contextual clues, they're still there, and they still help you help the story form. But I saw an interview and they talked about why they changed that, and they thought about the spores being airborne in the games is the spores would have been way more devastating. They would not have had nearly as many survivors, if any.
One of the bigger changes they made was what was being smuggled by Tess and Joel that makes them need so badly to have it back. That was taken by Marlene. We go from weapons, which in the game we don't really get much more than kind of inferring that weapons are important in this world to understand why they need these so badly.
Yeah, I don't think they explain who the end client was supposed to be.
Yeah, but in the show they change it to a car battery, which in one instance or in one way it emphasizes again how much the world has changed, that batteries don't last forever and we're down to a small amount for people to even be able to still be using automobiles. And then on the other hand, it gives even more of a reason for them to get it back because Joel in the show hasn't heard from Tommy.
Mhm.
And that is kind of making him agitated, and he wants to go check on Tommy. And that is going to get him already wanting to move towards the Midwest, and gives him more reason to accept the call of taking Ellie.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, okay, I guess I'll take this girl across. Tess died. Like, no, he still also wants to find Tommy, and he has a common goal to get to the Midwest where Ellie is supposed to go.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. A little bit extra motivation.
Yeah. So the battery was a huge change. In like, I guess you say that as like it's a battery versus guns. Who cares? It gave a lot more to the story to get Joel from point A to point B.
And
So.
did you want to talk about what most people probably see as the biggest change in the adaptation is the story of Bill?
Right. We get a whole episode of Bill. It's not just like a chapter in a game.
And we also don't get Bill with Joel and Ellie. We get Bill before the events happen. It's during the outbreak, right? And everybody who's seen it, it's during you get an episode during the outbreak, and you see, I think you start off with Bill very much as he was in the very crotchety and closed off. But the person who comes into his life and changes that is Frank.
Yeah, and you get like very vague implications of how much of a relationship they had. That like, yes, they lived together, but that's about it.
Oh, well, Bill refers to him as a partner. This is part of people were upset. They thought Bill was changed a lot. I don't think it was that much of a change.
So I think it was partially a change for the medium, because we talked about the peaks and valleys, and there's points in the game where it slows down a lot, and you're going at your own pace. But a show goes at the pace that it's got 45 minutes to tell you what's happening in the segment, and there's not a great way to slow down the story that we've been given and still make it impactful and have a moment to breathe in that section between Joel and Ellie, like the main plot line. So everything has to have something happening, and we're being driven into all this emotional stuff. And this is like episode 4 that Bill
Somewhere around there.
happened. Like, you get a moment to breathe, but it's still very engaging.
Mhm.
And it was, I think, also filled. You get a little bit filled in about 20 years of history while also getting to take a break, sort of. I mean, it was still very emotional, but it wasn't as like guns firing, zombies coming out and biting you.
You get a lot of gentle and caring moments that you don't get to experience the rest of the story. I think in the context of the story, Joel and Ellie, there wasn't room to explore. And so what the showrunners did is they took us back a little bit in time. And in a way, it's kind of like the DLC where it wasn't part of the original story. But I think it showed us some very meaningful moments.
What's Bill's partner's name?
Frank.
Yeah. Honestly, when we first meet Frank and when he's sitting down in the house eating the meal, I thought Frank was there to kill Bill.
Yeah.
Like
Kill Bill.
Kill Bill. Yeah. I was like, the whole time I was tense, like waiting for Frank to make a move. He is here. He knows this guy has resources.
Mhm.
Like I was waiting for that because the show has built you up at this point to hate humans.
Yeah. to not trust strangers. And
Yeah.
Bill exemplifies that
Stranger
perfectly.
danger.
Oh yeah, and I think it was executed perfectly both by the director and the actors in the scene in the multiple scenes. Is the other shoe gonna drop? Is this guy gonna kill Bill? And it didn't. It went the complete opposite direction. I think that was a way of kind of, if people didn't know it was going to happen, kind of subverting the expectations of the audience and actually giving them some happiness, which is very rare in this post-infection society. And we even get to see more scenes with Tess and Joel before Tess is killed.
Frank just dies of old age. Like they think it's cancer, right, in the show?
I don't remember what, but yeah, he did. They lived a long and happy life together.
Yeah. So I think in a way you get another potential outcome mirrored for Ellie and Joel. That two people came together, they form a tight bond, they live together for a long time, and then one of them chooses to pass on. That's, I guess, a sort of outcome that you could see from Ellie if she had been given a choice and she had chosen to basically sacrifice herself for humanity.
Mhm.
Like Frank chose to leave Bill, and you see what effect that has on Bill,
Mhm.
which would be again mirrored to Joel losing Ellie.
Yeah.
I think it was a nice way to explore that potential outcome before knowing it was coming.
it was different from the game, but it was changed in a way that felt the characters.
Instead of being escorted by Bill through a city,
Mhm.
which again, in the medium of television, they needed to break that up
Mhm.
because you can't just have every episode them being escorted or finding their way through an infected city
Mhm.
or an infected area.
Yeah.
They needed something else.
But yeah, so those were some of the changes from the show.
Yeah. And actually, I was thinking about this earlier. It was really cool. Just a random side anecdote. We were in Canada this summer, just outside of Calgary,
Awesome.
between Calgary and Banff, and we stayed in this little town, and we found out that it was the little town that Tommy ends up in the show. That's where they filmed it, and there was the
We got to
train bridge.
visit the bridge from one of the scenes in the show. It was really cool.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
But anyway, that's just a side anecdote. It was cool. We didn't know about it when we went, and then one of the waitresses at a restaurant we ate at was like, "Oh, by the way, did you know?" We're like, "No, we didn't actually."
Very true. Yeah, so that is the Last of Us, and the hero's journey is
Part one.
Part one. Our whole goal is to kind of go through these games, these stories, and break them down by their storytelling devices.
To follow the Zero's journey. Binary code puns, people. Let's
Zeros
go.
and ones.
Puns are fun.
All right. Well, that is it for A Zero's Journey. Hopefully, we get to do another episode and share that all with you. So if you enjoyed it and didn't enjoy it, tell us why. Hopefully, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
All right. I think we have enough stuff.